It's true that some things change as we get older. But if you're a woman over 40 and you're dealing with insomnia, brain fog, moodiness, and weight gain, you don't have to accept it as just another part of aging. And with MIDI Health, you can get help and stop pushing through it alone. The experts at MIDI understand that all these symptoms can be connected to the hormonal changes that happen around menopause. And MIDI can help you feel more like yourself again. Many healthcare providers aren't trained to treat or even recognize menopause symptoms. MIDI clinicians are menopause experts. They're dedicated to providing safe, effective, FDA-approved solutions for dozens of hormonal symptoms, not just hot flashes. Most importantly, they're covered by insurance. 91% of MIDI patients get relief from symptoms within just 2 months. You deserve to feel great. Book your virtual visit today at joinmidi.com. That's joinmidi.com.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with a Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
All right, so we're back with Ken and Mike. My uncles escaped Alcatraz after a very, very busy, fun, and exciting weekend on Alcatraz Island. And it was really interesting to, after talking for over a year about the island and the escape and what happened to, the three men who escaped and Ken's uncles, and then taking the ride there in the ferry the first morning for the 3-day extravaganza, these guys signing their book. It was a lot of fun. It was interesting.
He hasn't recovered yet.
Kevin,
Yeah.
You can tell he's a little, he's going to turn up the volume here for Ken.
No, his hand hasn't recovered from
My
signing
hand
books.
hasn't recovered.
Oh, your hand.
From signing so many books.
Yeah.
It was really busy. I mean, my God, I haven't been there in ages, but I could not believe how busy Alcatraz is and how many people from all over the world still come there, booked ferries all day long the whole time. And it wasn't like it was a holiday or anything. It was just crazy busy.
Yeah.
People just love it. They just love it. And they were so excited to see you guys. It was really cool to watch.
Yeah. And there was definitely a steady stream of people coming up, and we, just for our viewers, we shot a ton of video, and we did podcasts from there. We did like 2 days of podcasts there, but we also walked around, got a lot of visuals of, Ken and of the brothers' cells, John and Clarence's cell, and even the utility corridor. We walked all over it. The one thing I thought was really interesting is because I hadn't been there a while, it is pretty small. It's not that big, and so but we have a ton of video. We also got access to the catacombs underneath, which was got a private tour by Mike. What was it, Silverman, right? Michael Silverman?
Yes.
Silverman, who was our kind of handler on the island. He was amazing. He was great. He allowed us to do the podcast, and was basically our go-to guy on the island. And he couldn't have been more excited about us being there. And so thank you, Mike, if you're...
And the gentleman who gave us the actual tour of the catacombs.
I can't remember his name.
He was in...
I think it was Eric, I believe.
Yeah,
Eric,
I think he was really lovely and super nice and so informative. He knew so much.
Yeah. You forget how much history is surrounding that island, even before it was a prison island. So, and he really kind of took us down the rabbit hole into the catacombs, and we have video of that stuff. So I'm just going through all the footage right now. I was hoping to have some of it ready for today, but it's just too much. So we'll be kind of dispersing that footage and showing it to you guys over the next few weeks. So we got a lot to share with you. So stay tuned for that. But just want to check in with you guys. How have you guys recovered from that experience? I know you guys have done book signings before. How does it compare to the one that we just went to? And, what'd you think the overall feedback that you were getting?
I'm not sure you can compare any previous book signing with Alcatraz. Just being on the actual island, and having people, like you said, from all over the world come up to us, wanting to know more about the story, wanting to know more about John and Clarence. It was pretty surreal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the way they have it set up is, when you first get to the island, they have you get off the pier and they have one of the park rangers there, and they kind of give you the rules, and you want to be respectful of the prison and not doing anything that would be damaging to it, even unintentionally. And you have to, don't touch the birds. There's a bird sanctuary there, and there's like literally a billion birds on the island. They're everywhere, and unfortunately, Rob got hit by one, got nailed, or I should say baptized. He got baptized.
I didn't get hit as bad as the park person who was walking next to me. She was prepared for it. She had her hood on, and all of a sudden, blotch. And the guy goes, "Oh,
yeah, they're everywhere." But anyway, so you kind of do the switchbacks to the top, and then you go into the prison itself, and they have the equipment for the audio tour to go around the island, so you have a better idea of what happened there. It's a lot of the history and prisoner stories. And so you go, sort of meander around the prison to the different places. And of course, they're going to take you to John and Clarence's cell and Frank Morris and Alan West, and they're dressed up as though they were just there kind of thing. The rest of the cells are much more stripped down, in some cases, nothing at all. Nothing. And then eventually you spill into the place where we were. It's where all the books are, and the cups and the t-shirts and the hats, and Ken's wearing his Alcatraz t-shirt, and
we have Cindy's bag that she got
in the background
right there.
You got a hat and a cup. Everyone was like,
I got a cup.
So and then of course we're in the middle of that. They have a table set up for us, so they've already gone through the tour, so they already have an idea and understanding of the prison and a little bit about the brothers and the escapees. And as we're talking, you have this wall of people in front of you that are just hanging on every word, and you just see the smiles on their face, or just the looks of, wow, I never knew that. I never heard that before. And books in hand. And we had a line for a time for people just patiently waiting. And, we didn't just sign in and say thank you and, go buy it. We'd always have a little conversation with everybody and tell some stories and ask them where they're from and what their interest in Alcatraz was. And everyone was just so nice and friendly. And like you said, people from literally all over the world showed up. They're on vacation and coming to San Francisco, and you have to see Alcatraz if you're in San Francisco. It's just a go-to stop. So
there was so many people who said this was on my bucket list.
Yeah,
right.
That's what I thought was crazy. I was like, oh my gosh, look at all these people from very young to very old. I mean, the span of people too, like so many young kids and people that were, their faces when they were talking to you guys was hilarious, because they were just like big eyes, like, oh my God, you're related to them. You wrote this book. It was really a really fun experience to see.
Yeah, that's what I thought was cool, is you had a lot of young boys who were like fascinated, like, 10, 12 years old. The look on this one kid's face when, you were telling the whole story and stuff, he thought you were just the author. And he goes, those guys are my uncles. And the look at his face just went,
I know.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's like his mouth stayed open for about 10 seconds. He couldn't believe it. So,
but Ken, for you, what was that? And I've asked you this while we were there, because I can't even imagine what it must have felt like for you to be there, knowing that your uncles were there. They're part of this infamous case for half a century. And here you are now with your book that's now being featured there, which wasn't for a minute. You didn't know if that was going to happen. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Kind of tell everyone how you were feeling. I think it's just so amazing.
Well, it's like you said, every time I go onto the island, and I've only been on it, maybe a handful of times, actually. And every time I go on it, it's, reminds me, especially as I go by their cell, that I had relatives, uncles that actually were here. And yeah, it's every time, it almost kind of feels like a connection, every time I come onto the island. Of course, I know they're not there anymore. And that gives me a lot of joy. I didn't really believe that we were going to do this on the island. For so many years, for the first time we showed up in 2012, all of the park rangers were they were nice to us, but I had so many times that I had not a confrontation, but more of a debate with the head park ranger, Cantwell. I mean, every time I'd show up, he would kind of the last time I saw him, I walked up to him and he goes, "Oh, hey, Ken, did you bring John with you?" You know, so he's kind of like a jig at me. I said, "No, but he sent his regards."
Exactly.
But, you know, you could tell that the old guard.
There was like none of that there. I mean, you guys got the star treatment.
No, that's one of the things that really impressed me about this whole 3-day trip was the amount of park rangers that came up to us and asked us questions. We had several that purchased books from us. I mean, oh my gosh, I can't, you know this thing inside and out, supposedly, but had this one lady, she came and she asked me about my grandmother's funeral and John and Clarence supposedly showing up as women. And I told her about 2 other stories where they had dressed up as women just to evade law enforcement. And so she was going to start using this in her talk when she's doing tours. So it was just really amazing how many park rangers were supportive of this effort and wanted to know more about the story. So
yeah,
we're definitely changing hearts and minds.
I think between the book and the podcast, I mean, I think you're really kind of creating a different perspective for a lot of people because because there was still a lot of people like, people from other countries who didn't know a lot about the story. The interesting guy, and you'll see this exchange when we have the video, he was from Australia. And he had a really interesting take. First of all, it was funny how everybody, when you said you would we'd be talking, and then all of a sudden someone come up and look at us, you want to be on the podcast? And people were like, no. And then we just and then just one question, do you have a question? And all of a sudden, boom, they stick the mic in front of their face, and then boom, they're on the podcast. And then he was one of them. And he ended up staying for a few minutes because he had a lot of interesting questions. And, being from a prison colony, in Australia that started at a prison colony. It was really interesting. And he talked about some of his experience touring like old prisons in Australia. But he was fascinated with the escape. He was fascinated with the fact that they were your uncles, and he had some really interesting questions. But, he didn't know a lot about this stuff. And, and I think the people that came in that didn't really know a whole lot walked away like ready to dive into your book.
Yeah, I believe several of them even, said some of them were heading home. They were going to read it on the plane. We had one lady who was taking a criminal justice course. And so she came in asking some great questions. And when she learned about what happened to them in the federal trial, she was floored. She couldn't believe that they had been treated that way.
Yeah.
Compared to what she's now learning in the system from school. And then we had one kid, maybe 12, that had done a paper in school on Alcatraz. And now that he's got this book, he said, I'm going to go back and read the book. And then I'm going to, maybe do another paper based upon the information that I'm going to learn. So I was amazed at the amount of young people that came up. Asking questions, and they asked a lot of good questions. It wasn't just silly type questions. They asked very
thoughtful,
intelligent type questions that really you could really tell they were paying attention.
Yeah, they were very thoughtful about the way that they were asking the questions. But for Mike, for you also, I mean, you're the one that sought out Ken years ago. You always went out. Tell us about being there with your book and meeting all these people. It must have been surreal for you as well. I know I've already bugged you with these questions while we were there, but I just think the audience should know, that's a pretty incredible task that you guys have accomplished.
Well, actually, one of the questions that I asked Michael Silverman, like you mentioned earlier, he was sort of our liaison to the prison. He's kind of like head of operations there. So he's kind of running the show. And in the morning when we first showed up, he was, when we landed, we went on the boat with the workers, and he would kind of give them a little okay, this is what's happening today. And he introduced us so they knew we were there. And when the people get off the boat, they would say, oh, by the way, we have some writers here that wrote a book about Alcatraz. And so I asked him specifically about the book and how Ken was very doubtful that it would ever get accepted into the bookstore. And so I asked him about that, and he remembers when the book was submitted, that when we sent it to him, or to them, I should say, and he was on this committee, because it's more than just him. There's a group of people that decide yay or nay on the books that are allowed into the bookstore, and he didn't think it was going to get accepted because of the conclusions we draw that are very different than most of the other books at Alcatraz that focus on the escape. There's many other books that have different topics. We even found one about one of the women who got married on the island that was
exactly
across from us,
and a comic book.
Yeah, and there's comic books. There's other there's other theme books about Alcatraz, but the ones that deal with the escape mostly either say they didn't make it or we don't know what happened. It's up in the air and we can't conclude either way. And of course, ours tells a very different story about where they ended up outside the country. And he said the thing that made the difference for our book, that ultimately gave the permission to be on the bookshelves to be sold, and then later for us to go there, was because our book was sourced, that we had citations, we had things that we were drawing from to tell the story. It wasn't just our personal beliefs or our opinions or our theories that aren't backed up by facts. And so because they saw it as a credible, serious work that delves into the Alcatraz story, not just about the escape, but what life was like on Alcatraz and how they got there through the justice system, that they said, okay, this is a serious book and we can have it on the island, even though it may not have the ideas that we're completely embracing. And I think we moved the needle a little bit for Michael. I think he heard us, a number of times as he would pop in. And so that for me was very gratifying, that it wasn't just, oh, Ken's the nephew, let's put it on there because he has marquee value. It's like we had to earn our way onto
that. I think it's really amazing.
I think initially that probably kind of hurt you in a way because you felt like the book was biased because Ken was related to the two guys. So that but like you said, you guys brought the receipts with your book.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard to ignore the amount of work that you guys have done and, continue to do, as we're doing with you now. And it's, it's garnered an audience and a new audience, and hopefully even more people, because, we have big plans, hopefully coming to this story of your uncle's escaping, and we hope to even find out more information. So it's like the road is not ended in this investigation. It's kind of like, I think we just kind of, I would think we're at the 30-yard line, and we're ready to punch it into the end zone, and we got a really good game plan. So,
well, I thought it was really interesting that those cells were as small as they are. Like, I was not expecting that at all. I did not think that those cells were that small. I, for some reason, did not remember that. But after seeing how small those cells were, there's no doubt in my mind why they were so determined to get out of there. I mean, it's awful. Like, it's literally like this big. I mean, it's you can't even move. And I thought that was really interesting to see that again as an adult. I think the last time I was there was a kid, but also just knowing your uncles through your book, right, gave me a completely different perspective on them. And then seeing those small, tiny spaces and thinking about those men, there's just no way they were ever going to stay there.
Well, not only that, what I thought was really interesting is the fact, because it is a lot smaller than you think. That's the one thing I forgot, that it's not as, I've been to a lot of prisons. It's pretty small and can, it's basically almost the size of a jail, because it's like 250 inmates. But what was interesting is that the fact that they were able to conceal their work while they were doing it. And because everything echoes, there's high ceilings, it's all concrete and bars. The fact that they were able to conceal their work so, and be so quiet and be able to do all that with not having that much room, because if you're working down underneath when you look straight into the cell, the grate, the vent is right within your eyes. So if you look straight in, it's like north-south, you're looking in. Mm-hmm. So it's like they had to be, it was just amazing. It just makes it even more amazing. And then when you look into the utility corridor and you see how narrow it is with the pipes and stuff like that, how far they would have to climb and then get onto the roof. And then how they, and we kind of tracked this. Cindy and I walked around to try to, did like a video tutorial of like how they would where they would come out on and which pipe that they would come down. And then even when they got down out of the jail part, there was still a long way to go in order to get down to that dock. And then Ken, when we were pulling up for the first, when we got there on Thursday, was it Friday? Friday with you guys. And when you look at the dock is virtually the same. And how it's not like a dock where you have wood slats and stuff like that. It's a concrete dock with these solid with these and lots of these enormous, pillars, wood pillars that go down into the water. And there you can't see underneath there. No. So it's not like
those docks have been there, since the 30s.
Yeah, so it's easy to.
They were very well put together.
Yeah, and it's easy to see how they would not be discovered underneath there.
Nope.
Sitting in a black boat, wearing black clothing at night, they could have been, because it's pretty wide. It's like probably about a good 20 yards by 20-yard dock. It's pretty big. And how they could literally sit there waiting, being tied to the ferry that's going into town, and how they could get themselves and be undiscovered. I mean, it just, when you look at it though, it really is an amazing feat when you start kind of tracking their path. So that was really interesting.
And it's a very doable feat. I mean, even though, we look at it and we go, oh gosh, there's so many moving parts in this piece once they get to the docks. But, one, they had done this before, not so much in a raft. They would do it on a piece of wood, body surf. So they had the knowledge of how to do it. And it's like you said, if you could do it.
I mean, you have to worry about, you have guards and towers with guns and lights.
Say that again, Ken.
Well, if you're able to do it on a piece of wood, then you could definitely do it in a raft.
Yeah.
And Mike and I approved that a few years ago, that it can actually be done. And so it's not like this far-fetched type kind of notion that people think sometimes, how would they do it? But, we have old photos of the docks when they had the prison boats in. And one prison boat, I'm not sure if they had multiple prison boats or one was a guard boat.
I think they had several.
So, but one prison boat was always in the slip itself, and then the other one was parked on the outside. So I don't know. Me and Mike was kind of debating the night of the escape. I'm not sure which boat that they took to go back to the mainland, but I would assume that they left the one in the center, which they were using for prisoners, because if you had an emergency and you had to get a prisoner off the island, you couldn't wait for the boat to come back. I'm assuming they probably took the one on the outside, which really made tying up to it even that easier. Because once the boat kind of pulls off, it's going in the right direction. They're basically up under the docks and they're just sitting there waiting, and it's, once it takes off, it's a done deal.
And one of the things about the docks that's a little unusual, because normally a dock is pretty close to the water's edge. And sometimes they even kind of have a little like a flotation mechanism within it. So it sort of rises and falls with the tides kind of thing. Or if a boat passes by and there's a little bit of a wake. But these docks are about 7 or 8 feet above the water. They're not
higher than that.
They're not like right there on the water. They're raised up, so they could very easily have gone right underneath there and just waited in the shadows until the boat took off, and then they just sort of kind of go back a little bit until the extension cord is tight, and then it just pulls them into the bay. So even once they got to the dock, they were hidden. Nobody's going to see them in the night.
Yeah, that was interesting. But I think they're even higher than that.
Well, I thought it was really.
You were talking about the cells. When you look at those cells and you look at how tight it was, like you said, to the grate, you can kind of see where this definitely was a 2-man operation. There's no way that one person could be down there in that position and be able to get up fast enough if you heard someone come up behind you, a guard. So you had to always have someone looking out for you, which then brought up something that I thought about what Alan West said about the night of the escape. After all the men had left and he's still sitting down at his grate trying to break out, that was a very risky thing that he was doing, because he didn't have at that point Frank Morris watching for him.
Right.
Means that anybody could have walked by. A guard could have strolled by, could have seen him doing what he was doing, would have sounded the alarm, which pretty much would have caught them before they ever made it to the boat or to the airplane. So there's something about the way he tells this story. I'm not sure that we get the whole truth out of it.
It sounded like he wanted to inject himself somehow, like he wants to be a part of it, even though he wasn't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's
I don't think I think he never left his cell.
I don't think he did either. I know he talks about how he left the cell and, then he came back. But I agree with you, Rob. I don't think he ever left the cell. And the reason why is because, he did something that the other three men didn't do, or he says he did in his interview with the FBI. He takes his clothes. He takes all of his clothes, goes, he says he goes up to the roof or to the top of the cell house. He realizes he can't go through the shaft, so he takes his clothes off. And this is him telling that, goes up to the roof, pulls his clothes up, gets dressed, goes, looks and sees that they're gone, comes back, redoes the whole complete thing all over, back down into his cell. But then you just go, in the FBI, you can notice this in their interview with him. They question him, well, why did you take your clothes? Because he comes back with, I didn't know there was any other clothes. So they undoubtedly questioned that and saw that as kind of a red flag.
Yeah, that makes sense.
He didn't do the same thing that the other three men did. So
right.
What's the difference here?
I think he just wanted attention.
I thought it was funny. One of the younger kids, the boys, asked him about that, the whole thing, and he said he can remember. He said he chickened out. I think he chickened out. And you were like, yeah, you're right. I think
to this day that John warned him. I mean, he was friends with John. He had been in prison with John before in Florida. I don't know if Clarence was there or not, but he did know John. He's the one who he went to whenever he found the grate or the vent not shut up. I believe John found out that Frank Morris was going to kill him if anything went wrong. Mm-hmm. And he told him, you better not come with us. And I believe he found a way not to come.
Yep. Probably smart.
I thought it was really interesting how you guys were like, well, why do you think they didn't make it? And every single person was like, because they had to swim.
And you're like, I swam it.
And then, I'm looking at we're in the ferry and you can see like it's pretty big distance, but it's swimmable. There's people swimming out there, even though there's a 40-foot whale that we saw, but there's people swimming.
Recreationally.
We saw them swimming with a rope, a kayaker and a crew, like,
Well, when I was out there doing in 2016 to do the race, there was a young boy that I believe it was in the papers. He had just from the Marina Green, he swam out to Alcatraz, back out to Alcatraz, and back again, and he was only 12 years old.
Wow!
So tell me that a 12-year-old could do it, but a grown man that's in his early 30s. We showed you pictures of how broad John.
They were swimmers. They were built like swimmers.
John and Clarence both were excellent swimmers. If they had the need to swim, they would have swum, and they could have made it.
Yeah.
But they didn't. Like I said, we shocked a lot of people. They barely even got in the water.
Right.
They probably got more wet when they were transferring from the raft onto the boat that was waiting for them than they did anytime.
Yeah, that's the interesting part. And then also one of the books that I was flipping through, it said that the case was closed in 1979. And I'm like, it was?
Well, with the FBI, it was. They closed the case and then they gave it to the marshals.
Exactly.
Didn't say that in the book.
That's another thing that is so strange to me is, why is it that if the FBI in the very first couple of pages in volume 1, maybe in volume 2, they come to a conclusion that the men more than likely drowned. Well, then why did they continue on with the investigation? If that was their conclusion or their early assessment, why did they keep it for almost 17 years before they give it to the U.S. Marshals? What is it that they were doing all that time? Nothing. Most of their interviews were done early on. with the family members and other inmates. So I just don't understand why they felt like it was something that they needed to retain for that many years before they ever called in the U.S. Marshals to do their work.
Yeah, well, they just wanted it out of their hair at that point.
I mean, I've tried to find out, cases that escape cases from prisons that FBI, and I have found none except for the Alcatraz that they ever kept it that long.
Shopping is hard.
I can never find anything in my size.
I don't even know my size.
I buy my clothes the same place I buy my groceries.
There's a better way. Make it easy with Stitch Fix. Just share your size, style, budget, and done. Your personal stylist sends pieces picked just for you.
That was easy.
Stitch Fix. Online personal styling for everyone. Free shipping and returns. No subscription required. Get started today at stitchfix.com.
Choice Hotels gets you more for your money so you can maximize any road trip. Like with the road trippers we see here in their natural habitat, the breakfast area at a Comfort Inn. Here's a dad teaching his son how to make waffles, fluffy golden waffles. There's a mom making sure her daughter eats some fruit to avoid the "I'm hungry" from the back seat. And a sibling standoff over the last muffin. This is the cycle of vacation maximizationing in all its glory. Check into more. Book direct to choicehotels.com.
Alcatraz was something was different about Alcatraz.
Absolutely. Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
It's the reason why I say there's more to this story. I've always believed once we started down this path, there's more to this story than just the escape.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. I mean, the whole Justice Warren thing and Mickey Cohen and Whitey Bulger and all these people and Bumpy Johnson and how nobody said anything because the other cellmates knew what they were doing.
Of course they did.
I mean, come on. There's no way. There's just no way. Everybody knew what was going on. They just all kept quiet. Why would they keep quiet? Unless they knew they better keep quiet because they're going to get in trouble.
You knew the guys living right across from them knew what was going on because they could look right into their cells. And the ones on the second tier, they could see down into it. So there you got, like, depending upon if they were friendlies. I can't remember. I can't remember if we walked to. Did you remember which cell that Whitey Bulger was in? Did we ever find that out?
I believe he was on top. I think Mike, right? He was the one. He was on the second row.
Let me go look real quick.
And his is pretty much.
So just from that visual range, you're talking of at least 8, 9 people could see right into their cells.
And even
that was something that Whitey told me because I asked him about one time if he ever saw the portraits that John was painting. And he said that it was a prison, how would you say, etiquette among prisoners, that you never looked in another man's cell. If you ever walked by, he said, and the other prisoner, the inmate, saw you staring inside of his cell, there would be words and maybe even a fight. I mean, that was a no-no. So I don't know whether or not the people across from him. Now they might not have been sitting there staring, but surely.
It's unavoidable. I mean, it's like there's between the tiers, the little path. It's only 10 feet.
Yeah, I mean,
now, you're talking about the African American inmates that were on the other side of them. Yes, they had to hear what was going on.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And, there's a lot of people thought, especially like from the movie, that Frank Morris went to Bumpy Johnson and had a conversation with him. But according to what I believe it was Michael Esslinger told me this, and I believe also Whitey Bulger might have mentioned this, that Mickey Cohen and Bumpy Johnson were good friends. And they would stroll a lot together in the yard, whereas some white prisoners would look at him and pretty much kind of like, "Hey, you're not supposed to be, hanging out with these African American people," but he didn't really care. So if it is possible that Mickey Cohen is the one who convinced him, to pretty much go to your people, I'll say your people, because he was pretty much the leader of the African American group, and pretty much say, you don't say anything.
Yeah.
This is to all of our advantage for this escape to occur.
Yeah. Or it's one mob boss to another,
Well, they were both from New York, so they had that in common, and then they both knew what racism was because Mickey Cohen was Jewish, and of course, Bumpy Johnson was African American, so they had that in common as well, just dealing with just prejudice in the culture. As far as Whitey Bulger goes, he was mostly during the planning and the execution of the escape. He was in cell C314, so he was on the third tier, and then just before in April, he got moved to C310, so the same area. So he was on the other side of them. Third tier. He was pretty far removed physically from what was happening.
Yeah, interesting. And
he did keep up with it. So
yes, I mean, like even though he was on the other side, I mean, it's not that big of a distance. I mean, I would imagine that people on that tier could hear what was going on.
Well, and he knew it was happening the night that it happened. I'm not sure how many other prisoners. I know there have been a lot of talk about John and Clarence and Frank going around telling everybody goodbye on Sunday. But some might have thought maybe they go in Sunday night. They wait and go Monday night, but undoubtedly Whitey knew that it was happening that night because
Robert Scheiblein said that he knew too. He was waiting.
Yeah, there were probably several of them that knew.
Yeah, there was another inmate that heard the noise on the roof, and he said in the FBI report that he didn't want his name to be used because if it was known that it was not healthy for him to reveal this information, as he put it. So there were at least several other inmates, probably more, that were aware that it was going down.
Yeah. Well, the fact that their cells were right next to each other, 150 and 152, and like literally, I mean, they could reach out and touch each other through the bars. And they're that close. So it's like, boy, was that a big mistake.
Yeah, putting them next to each other.
That when Ken and I did the Expedition Unknown, when we were filming in the cell block, one of the things that we were talking about was how important it was for them to be on the first floor, because when they were first, when they first dug out the back, the utility corridor was sort of their staging, or not staging area. That's where they sort of hid things like the files and the blades, and when they were working on the dummy heads and other things that they would just put back there, hoping nobody would go into the corridor. And then eventually they worked their way to the top of the cell block, and that because they needed more room when they were working on the raft, because the raft was 14 foot long and that just wasn't going to work in the corridor. But if they had been on the second or third tier, that wouldn't have worked.
No,
because they didn't have an area to put things. They'd have to lower it to the ground every time and, kind of bring it up, or climb down, climb up and make more noise. So the fact that they were on the bottom level made all the difference for the escape.
Absolutely. They had all that staging area.
It was definitely to their advantage, and it gave them the pathway that they needed. And I'm not sure how well it could have been pulled off if they were on the second, or definitely not on the third. That would have been a long way to come down every night to work on stuff.
Yeah,
right. Exactly.
Yeah. The other thing I thought was interesting is that when, you start telling people when they were coming up and they're asking questions, and then when you would say, and they said, well, what happened to them? And he goes, well, and you tell them what happened. You said they made it off the island. They went to Mexico and they lived out their lives in Brazil and stuff. And they go, how do you know that? And he goes, well, what page? 384?
340. Page 340.
340. And you're like, whip out the book. He goes, yeah, they are. And people are like, what?
It was great.
Well, and that was the most because when people would come up to us, we'd say, hey, do you have any questions for us? Ask us anything you want. We'll we won't shy away from any question. And the most common question by far was, did they make it? Or do you think they made it? Mm-hmm. They really wanted to know if they really were successful again and again and again.
Mm-hmm.
And when we'd say, absolutely, yes, and then you'd say, like you said, well, okay, how do you know they made it? And then we go into the
and they got their book that they're ready to buy, and you go, page 340.
It was great.
There's a picture of them.
But
yeah,
also,
it was good. I enjoyed it. I would definitely go back.
Yeah, it was fun.
Well, I think they'd want you back. I mean, it seemed like you guys had I mean, it was like the perfect storm, because like you said, they had before they even had to go leave that area, there was you couldn't avoid you guys, plus the fact that we had all the cameras and set up for the podcast. So people were naturally gravitating to that. And you guys were surrounded by your books. Your books were everywhere. They did a great job. Like even that bookshop, that bookstore that's right down where you get off before you get on the pier. It was only your books that were in there.
Mm-hmm.
It was like maybe a couple other things, but it was just lined all your books. So it was a great event for you guys as far as getting your book out there. But like I said, it was and just you guys sitting there, we're talking about it on the podcast, and people come and look at it, and then you're like, come on the podcast, and they ask questions and they engage and they kind of hung out there for a while, and it was fascinating. It was fascinating hearing a lot of people from different parts of the world who were like intrigued. And then there was this one woman, they were Sri Lankan, but she worked at a jail somewhere. Oh, in Orlando, right? Orange County?
Orlando, yeah. One of the large prisons.
Yeah. And so she was just like fascinated, and having someone who actually, there was a couple people that actually worked in the correctional, industry that came up.
We even had a mayor, right? From where was she from?
I think it was one. It was in Indonesia. She was from Indonesia, but she was the mayor of a city or a town.
Yeah, she was the mayor of one of those towns.
Well, and again, you'd already mentioned this, but we have the cameras set up, and you're there with the microphone and the whole setup, and then people would come up and we'd say, "Oh, do you want to be on a podcast?" Like, no, I don't want to go on camera. And then it'd be like, "Oh, so what's your name?" "Oh, my name's Bob." "Okay, Bob, where are you from?" "Oh, I'm from Philadelphia." And then you would, of course, put the microphone there, and then they just sort of like, "Oh, this isn't so bad. This is like, we're relaxed now, and we're friendly and having this conversation about, what brought you here, what you think about Alcatraz, and do you think they made it?" And after a while, they didn't even know the cameras are there. They just sort of forgot about it. And there was only one person out of everybody we talked to that just, "No, I don't want to be on the podcast." And that was it. Everyone else sort of like.
But you had the book. You got the book signed.
Yeah. So, they finally like, okay, this podcast thing is a little scary at first, but it's not so bad.
And we had a few people that purchased more than one at one time.
Mm-hmm.
We had one lady who purchased one, walked away, and then came back and got another one.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but she
must have gifts. They were getting gifts for people at that point.
Some were for Father's Day, because Father's Day was on Sunday, and so this is for my dad. His name is kind of thing. Like, oh, what a great present. Nice story to read.
Yeah, and they can get it signed, and they said they met the authors. I mean, it's like
Yeah, it's really cool, and they didn't know all the stuff that you guys have in that book. I mean, no one talks about that stuff. Like, you would never know any of these things. Like I said, before I read the book, I had no idea.
Well, most of the books out there are really kind of around the historical piece of Alcatraz, when the island started, how long it's been there, and the different phases it went through, the Battle of Alcatraz. They definitely will cover the escape, but most of the stories that they have in those books, especially around John and Clarence and Frank Morris, is that, they show up at the island. They don't pretty much tell you about how they got to the island. I mean, they don't cover, Frank Morris came from Atlanta and why he was on his way to Alcatraz. And nor do they cover like Whitey Bulger. And then, then they, like Mike said, they cover pretty much about the escape, and then they get down to the water, and that's the end of the book. And it's either they drown or no one knows what happened to them. So that's the end of it. But we bring a definitely different viewpoint to this. And we take it from not so much starting the island, but how did John and Clarence get there? Because there's an amazing story about how they get to Alcatraz.
I think also people were surprised at the crime that got them there, because everything right now, it's like, oh, you can steal, you can do this, you can do that, you're not going to go to jail. And they had a toy gun. They go to Alcatraz. They almost get executed. It's insane.
It is very crazy.
And that's why people were kind of shocked too, because I don't think they realized. I mean, because how would you know? Like, they come off like you would just assume
that they're the worst.
That they're the worst of the worst, and that they didn't make it because they had to swim, right? So those are just assumptions. But once you dig into the book and you realize that these two guys, they weren't bad guys. No. They did stupid thing, but they weren't bad. They didn't deserve to go to Alcatraz, for God's sake. That
Speaking of
godforsaken place.
I don't think I've ever asked this. I don't know if you guys know this, but what led Whitey Bulger getting thrown into Alcatraz, and also
that's an interesting story.
And
he shared it with me in a letter.
He actually shared it several times. Several of his letters.
Into the book a little bit. Him and Frank Morris were both in Atlanta. I don't think Frank Morris was in part of the escape that Whitey Bulger was working on. He just happened to have been caught in another, and they kind of went at the same time. But Whitey said that they were getting ready to plan an escape, and he had befriended a guard, and he had paid this guard off. Doesn't say what the amount of money was, and all the guard was supposed to do was to bring a ladder and put it up against, I guess, whatever they were going to have to go over.
Well, they were on the second floor of the infirmary.
Yeah, and so so this is all he was going to do is set the ladder there, and then they were going to use it. Well, lo and behold, part of the people that, I guess there were several people involved in this escape. One was a snitch, and he goes to the warden and turns everybody in. Says Whitey Bulger was the one leading it, and that there was a guard helping. No one knew the name of the guard, only Whitey Bulger. He was the only one that had contact with this individual. And so the warden comes to Whitey, tries to get him to, according to Whitey, throws him in the hole. I keep thinking of this hole in the ground, but, in cell, solitary confinement, leaves him there for multiple days, comes every day.
He said he was there for 3 months.
Yeah, asking for the name of this guard.
Right.
Whitey refused to give it to him.
Trying to break him.
Trying to break him. And then one day he came and he said, okay, this is your last chance. You either give me the name of the guard or I'm going to ship you off to Alcatraz. That's how he went to Alcatraz.
Oh, wow.
Give the name. And I always thought, okay, here's an inmate that is refusing to give the name of the people that they hate, which are guards. And because of that loyalty that he had to someone who, when he said, hey, I promise I won't do this, he literally took that serious. And he was willing to go to Alcatraz and do time there because he would refuse to give up the name of that guard. And he never would even tell me the name of the guard.
Wow.
To this day, I don't know if anyone ever knows who.
And he commented in the letters, because he's told the story more than once, that if he, like Ken said, if he was loyal to somebody that he didn't like at all, he was just, it was just this person of convenience that can provide him with a ladder, but he didn't like him because he was a guard. If he honored his word for that, he says, how much more will I do it for the people that I'm working with that are on my team? Because he was saying, the worst thing for Whitey was if you betrayed, if you were a snitch, if you were a rat, he said that you were the lowest of the low. He had no love. There's no love lost there for somebody like that. So his word was bond.
That's kind of ironic because that's not how he ended up.
I know. And that's one of the things he hated. He told me he hated the fact that they painted him out to be a snitch. He said, I was not a snitch. He said, he utilized the FBI to his advantage. He would give them things just enough to work for his good. So he said, I never snitched or ratted anybody out. Now, he did say that there were a couple of, I guess, other criminals that needed to be put away. And so
competitors, maybe.
Yeah. So he would use the FBI in order to accomplish that. So he would use them in order to get rid of people that he thought needed to be gotten away with. So, but he really hated that. He hated being painted a snitch. In one letter, he went on and on and on about how he would never be that kind of person.
Now, he also tells a funny story when he and Frank Morris were in Atlanta because they knew each other. They were friends. And Frank Morris left first because he escaped from Louisiana and was gone and he gets caught and then he gets sent to Atlanta and he tries to escape again. And that's when they decide to ship him to Alcatraz. So he goes first and they go cross country by train. And then a couple weeks later, Whitey Bulger is going to be sent to Alcatraz, but they fly him across the country.
Yeah.
And he had to promise that he wouldn't try to escape. He wouldn't try to do anything. He says, I won't do anything. I'll be a model prisoner. So he's handcuffed on the plane and actually he was with another guy, another inmate, and the guy tried to take the plane. He tried to get access to the cockpit. He tried to get, and he was going to take the plane down. He's going to crash it, and the marshals there, grabbed him before he could do it. So he ends up in San Francisco. He spends the night in the local jail, and then the next day he goes to Alcatraz, and then a few days later, Frank Moore shows up because he didn't know, because when he left Atlanta, he, of course, Whitey was still there, and then he sees them when they're eating, and it's like, hey, it's Whitey, what are you doing here? And it's like he pretended like he didn't know who he was. He was like, I don't know who you're talking. I'm not Whitey Bulger, because it's like, so he was just messing with them.
Yeah, he said they had bet each other who would get there first. And Whitey told him, he said, I'll beat you there. He undoubtedly had a lot of he was a character,
Yeah, for sure.
As good as a character could be. But even with Whitey Bulger, you have to kind of go back, and when you listen to him talk about the stuff that they did to him in Atlanta on that drug program that he was in, I mean, he would talk about how his skin would basically crawl off of his body, and he would see things that he didn't know whether or not he was dreaming or if it was real. And they pumped things with so much LSD and testing him. I've always said, Whitey Bulger was a monster, but I believe the federal government created the monster.
Yeah, well, it's the same thing with Charles Manson. That whole thing. They were dosing him pretty hard too when he was in jail and prison, and then and then he got out. And he started his own little commune.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, the federal government has a lot to own up to, and they're gonna. I know they destroyed all of the files, and maybe that's the reason why I've never been able to find anything on Alfred. His time in Atlanta.
You need to go and find this book called Chaos by Thomas O'Neill. He wrote extensively about this, about the MK Ultra thing. I still, to this day, I haven't gotten a chance to buy the book yet. I keep on saying, I gotta do it. And I'm just going to do books on tape because it's probably the easiest thing for me, because I don't really have time to read, because it's pretty thick, but it explains the whole program.
Well, undoubtedly something happened with Alfred and his part of the experiment, because I've written several letters to the federal prisons and also the one in Atlanta, and every single time they come back and tell me that they could find nothing on Alfred, that it looks like it had all been deleted or removed. And how am I going, how is that possible? How do you not have records on him? And there's no records on him whatsoever. Kilby Prison the state of Alabama has no records on him whatsoever.
That's crazy.
Well, it's not crazy. It's calculated, and it's like, they don't want you to find out what's going on. If you're doing, it's like, when they had that Abu Ghraib thing happen, over in Iraq, and anytime they're doing anything with these black sites, and it's like they don't keep track of it. There's not going to be, if there is paperwork, it disappears very quickly.
I'm going to tell you, it's been so strange, because I've always wanted to. The only photographs we ever have of Alfred were before he went to prison on various photos, and then of course when he's lying in the coffin. So none of the photos. Well, we have the one when he was in Kilby when we went to see him. That's probably, I guess, the last photo of Alfred. But none of his prison mugshots. We don't have any of the letters that he wrote home. Well, we have some, but the ones that he wrote, or people wrote him, rather, not the ones that the ones that people wrote him, were sent to his ex-wife after his death. And we talked about how mysteriously that information disappeared. So there's all of the letters that the family wrote John and Clarence. We don't have any of those. The FBI still has them in their possession today. Crazy. It's like, after 60 something years, you keep saying that they drown.
Right.
Why do you need these letters? Why do you need a photograph of me when I was a year old. I mean, why do you have all of this information and all this stuff that belongs to us? Well, what are you going to use it for?
Don't know.
And actually, that kind of reminds me when we went to the catacombs and we're being shown around, and they have these, you can call them cells. I mean, the bars are gone, but it's sort of like this brick.
It's a hole
Structure that's sort of pushed back from the wall, and the bars have since been removed. But they said they used to shackle them to the bars where your arms and your wrists are
over your head.
Right, and you're there for like 2 weeks, and it was pitch black dark.
Yeah.
Because this is back 100 years ago, so they didn't have electricity down there, so it was all done by oil lamps, and you're there for 2 weeks for punishment. I mean, that's like major punishment. And then for us, they turned off the lights for about 30 seconds, and it was totally dark, and you're just standing there in the quiet in the dark for 30 seconds, and you
couldn't even hear the water outside or anything.
No.
And then when that guy slammed the door, that didn't sound good.
And then they finally turned the lights back on.
It was so scary.
And it's like they did that for 2 weeks, and then they also in the dark they would scratch their names or their numbers on the brick walls.
Yeah, you guys are going to see us. We're going to show you all this video. We have a great walkthrough with the video, and you'll be able to experience what we saw. And
yeah, I mean, it was like, their form of punishment was very severe. Where I can't imagine what that's like. You're just chained to or cuffed to bars for 2 weeks in the dark, and you're just standing there, and how do you sleep when you're standing like that?
It's horrible.
Yeah. And they were basically, their crime was, I think, it was like religious persecution, basically.
Well,
right?
They refused to
They're like Mennonites who didn't to avoid the draft.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
draft dodging.
Horrible.
Basically what they were in there for.
Yeah. Wait till you see this. It's incredible.
On the draft card.
Well, everyone, we're excited to get all those videos out. And we'll, like I said, for the next 3 weeks, you're going to be seeing a lot of Alcatraz footage and seeing Ken and Mike at the book signing and interacting with, interested parties and fans and new fans. I think you guys created a bunch of new fans too. We were pumping the podcast too. So hopefully they'll, if you were on Alcatraz when we were there, reach out to us on our YouTube page and tell us what you thought. And like I said, you might find yourself on this podcast in the next few weeks. So anyway, thanks so much, guys. Great seeing you over the weekend. Great meeting your both of your lovely wives, and glad to spend some time and have some dinner with you guys. And because it's like, well, people think that we were around each other all the time. It was the first time we were all together in the flesh.
Yeah.
It was interesting.
It was fun. We had a really good time.
Yeah, it was a great weekend. All right, guys. So we'll talk next week.
All right.
Hi, I'm Richard Karn, and you may have seen me on TV talking about the world's #1 expandable garden hose. Well, the brand new Pocket Hose Copperhead with Pocket Pivot is here, and it's a total game changer. Old-fashioned hoses get kinks and creases at the spigot, but the Copperhead's Pocket Pivot swivels 360 degrees for full water flow and freedom to water with ease all around your home. When you're all done, this rust-proof anti-burst hose shrinks back down to pocket size for effortless handling and tidy storage. Plus, your super light and ultra-durable Pocket Hose Copperhead is backed with a 10-year warranty. What could be better than that? I'll tell you what, an exciting exclusive offer just for you. For a limited time, you can get a free Pocket Pivot and their 10-pattern sprayer with the purchase of any size Copperhead hose. Just text WATER to 64,000. That's WATER to 64,000 for your 2 free gifts with purchase. WATER to 64,000.
By texting 64,000, you agree to receive recurring automated marketing messages from Pocket Hose. Message and data rates may apply. No purchase required. Terms apply. Available at pockethose.com/terms.